question that I want us to consider this morning. How good am I at apologizing to others? A certain psychologist said that apologizing, it actually temporarily reduces one's self-esteem. And I think this is important. The offender who apologizes actually yields some power and yields some control. Having announced that their imperfection and error, that we actually announce those things, me as the offender, I'm now standing here vulnerable to someone else. It takes humility to make a sincere apology. And for some people, humility is just too uncomfortably close to humiliation. So can you think of the worst apology you've ever given someone? Or in the case that you've never given a bad apology, what about the worst apology someone has ever given to you? Maybe it was something like this. I'm sorry that you're hurt by what I said. Or how about, if you wouldn't have been such a jerk, I wouldn't have been such a jerk. One more. There's a lot of them. I'm sorry I hurt you, but you said those things that just made me so mad. The reality for me is that apologies are hard. Maybe harder for some, but I think for all of us, apologies are hard. And if you're anything like me, you have friction in relationships. Some more than others, but you have friction in your relationships as you at some point along the line have caused offense. You've caused harm or any form of love lost between you in that relationship. And in that, it may be hard for you to apologize. Small offense or big offense, saying the words, I am sorry, or I apologize, and actually meaning it cost you something. See, as I look around at the health of relationships in our culture today, our friendships, our families, our coworkers, neighbors, even the relationships within us as a church, I think we're desperate for people who have the ability and the courage to actually apologize for the wrong that they've done. See, the reality is that we all cause harm at some point in our relationships. Again, from the biggest things to the smallest things. And I believe that our lack of ability and courage to apologize for the wrong that we have done is quite literally ruining relationships. It's quite literally ruining families. And not just ruining these relationships, I think it's also ruining us transforming into people of love. As our apologies are most often shallow and don't actually lead to change. So again, how are you at apologizing to those that you have wronged? I believe that our ability to say, I am sorry, is actually more of a reflection of who we are and not the person on the other end. But isn't it so easy to do that? And when I get in a situation that I have messed up, man, the first thing I want to do is look for ways out of it, why it was someone else's fault, why it's not just me messing up, but something else caused it. Right? We're so quick to project onto other people, to look to other people, to find faults in other people, to look down on others. So our current sermon series that we may be one, we're in our third week of, and it's inspired by Jesus's final prayer before he heads to the cross. So in John 17, 20-21, it says this, my prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us so that the world may believe that you've sent me. See, as Jesus prays for this oneness, this unity amongst his followers. We talked last week that people of God who have the Spirit of God in them, we've been positionally united, meaning that we all have the same Spirit, and in that position, we're united with one another. We're united with God and we're united with each other. Now we get to do the work from this positional unity, and we call that practical unity, which helps us to achieve this unity in relationships. Really, it's the work of actually reconciliation. How do we do the work of repairing and working towards wholeness in what has been broken? And as we talked last week, a practical way which we can pursue reconciliation is to forgive freely as we have been forgiven freely. Now, for forgiveness, we find ourselves on the other side of being offended or hurt by someone. So what happens when we're on the side of causing the harm or the offense? Can you think of a relationship right now, maybe in the last week, the last months, even go into the past years, which you've done something, you've said something, or maybe you even just passively have pulled away from because of the wrong that you have done and pulled away from the disunity in the relationship that you've caused? Maybe it was harmful actions or words towards your spouse, a lack of integrity towards your employer or fellow employees, maybe a break in trust with a good friend or a roommate. Again, the list can go on and on and on here. So is there anything outstanding in your life that you may need to apologize for to bring healing to a relationship? And then what's standing in the way of that? In the book of Luke, which is the third account in your New Testament of Jesus' life and ministry, in the New Testament, chapter 18, verses 9 to 14, read this. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector over here. I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of all that I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but he beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all those who humble themselves will be exalted. We're going to talk about humility in a couple weeks from now, but what I want to point out is this Pharisee. He was looked up to as a religious leader. He just kept the law rigorously. He practiced all the spiritual practices for merit based on religiosity. In all of his self-righteousness, he could do nothing wrong. He could pray to God while looking down on others because of his stature. This is the position the posture from which he actually approaches God. And notice what Jesus says about him at the end. Those who exalt themselves will be humbled. Now, do you see how this posture could actually play into your relationships when you've done something wrong? When you've done wrong, how quick are you to actually see the wrongdoing in yourself? How quick do you actually get to a place of saying, man, I've caused harm? Or are you quicker to blame the wrongdoing of others? Your spouse, your roommate, your neighbor, your friend. It's like, I'm sorry, but aren't you just being a little bit sensitive here? I'm sorry, but you just made me mad. I'm sorry you think that I did something wrong. It's funny, I just did this the other night, I feel like. I had said something in poor tone to Caitlin, and she was explaining to me why it was wrong. And rather than actually owning up to it and wanting to heal the wrong that I've done, I gave one of those really good, okay, I said I was sorry already type of apologies. See, it was probably actually still in the same tone that I had originally caused harm with. But see, I chose to be the righteous one in the situation, which was that she was in the wrong for not accepting my first crappy apology. See how subtle that can be in our lives and how that can cause separation, disunity in our relationships? Have you ever been there? You've caused harm, but you just want to hide from the wrong you've done. You're embarrassed and ashamed about it. So the relational separation just kind of festers and actually gets worse. You might even be there right now with somebody. See, I think for us culturally, when we have done something wrong, shame actually ends up saying that we are wrong, that who we are is bad, not just the action that we've done. We actually see this in the creation narrative where Adam and Eve actually hide from God And then they start blame shifting each other and the serpent and everything else because they were filled with shame. But watch what Jesus does here in this passage. He says that the self-righteous Pharisees' prayers don't even get above the temple walls. And then he goes on to say, I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. Justified means to be made righteous, to be in right standing, to be reconciled. But who did he say that about? He said it about the tax collector. The tax collector who was despised by people, who was the reason that women would have to prostitute themselves, that children would actually starve, as he was the one that would collude with the Roman government to take advantage of citizens. See, Jesus, what he's pointing out here, it's everything about our posture. The posture of righteousness, of exalting oneself, will eventually lead to being humbled, aka being humiliated. The posture, which has a hard time saying, I apologize, that is the posture of the Pharisee here. But the posture of the humble, those who have a repentant heart and actually see mercy for the wrong that they've done and admit it and go after reconciliation, they will be made righteous. So when you do wrong, when you cause harm, what's your posture? Again, are you quicker to blame shift and to get defensive over what you've done? Or is it that of a tax collector? The posture of repentance, recognizing that you've fallen short relationally and wanting to make it right by apologizing, turning from the harmful ways, and reconciling the relationship going forward. Psychologists say that a good apology is one that restores relationships. It's clear-eyed and it's realistic about flaws and mistakes. It calls for both parties to actually offer acceptance to each other, including the acceptance of yourself in this matter. If you're the apologizer, it's actually opposed to shame and defensiveness. An apology actually allows for a courageous and a humble solution. See, this idea that we cannot accept ourselves, even in our shortcomings and wrongcomings, I believe is the foundation to being an apologetic person, a person of repentance. And this is the message which God continues to communicate to us through his son, Jesus. As I talked about a minute ago before the sermon, that in the harm that we have caused relationally, the chasm between our relationship from our brokenness and our shame with God, Jesus was actually crucified on our behalf. And in all of our wrongdoing, we are loved and accepted in spite of it. This is what empowers a repentant heart from us. Saying that, God, I'm sorry for all the wrong that I have done. I thank you for your love and acceptance of me. I want to turn from the ways in which I damage my relationships with you and with others. And as the tax collector says, have mercy on me. So one ongoing battle, like I mentioned a moment ago, in my life has been a demeaning tone of voice with honestly those closest to me. Most often showing up in my relationship with my wife, Caitlin, and also with my mom. My mom always used to even tell me, Ryan, you need to start working on this now or you'll end up talking to your wife this way. So a handful of years into our marriage, and that statement could not have been more true. And what's at the heart of it, I'm not exactly sure. But a couple of years ago, I got to the point of realizing more than ever that this isn't going to just passively go away. The wrong that I was doing, the friction in the relationship that I was causing, the hurt and the offense. So then I learned about transforming conversations and how we actually invite people into the process of growth by stating where we're at currently and where we want to be. So I once again, this a couple years back, I defended Caitlin with my tone of voice. And afterwards, I went to her and I tried on this idea of this transformational conversation. And it looked something like this. Hey, babe, I realize that my tone of voice has hurt you again. It's hurt you for a long time, and it hurt you again today. I want you to know that I do not like that and that I actually want to be better. I would like to not talk to you in this tone anymore. Can you share with me how you feel when I talk to you like that. It was silent for a moment. I stood there feeling vulnerable and exposed, somewhat expecting what she was going to say, but for the first time ever, I was actually ready to listen. She looked up at me, a bit tearful, and said, "Under all of it, it makes me feel like you don't love me, Ryan." Now, I'm not sure I've ever been in so much pain before by someone's words towards me. The brutal honesty that just ripped through me. And for the first time, I actually felt the hurt that I had caused. So the next step I shared with her, and I shared my feelings and what I wanted to see happen going forward. And then I actually committed to doing better going forward and invited her into the process with me if she was willing. Now, the sad thing, I still have a tone of voice problem. Has it gotten better? Yeah, I'd like to think so. But what I realize is that these transformational conversations need to happen often. So transformational conversations look something like this, and I want to encourage you to write down and try on the next opportunity you have. Accept and state the damage that you have done. I'll put these in the chat afterwards. Listen to how your actions have hurt the other person. Apologize and paint the vision of where you want to be. Invite that person into the process to provide accountability and action steps. Give your word that you want to reconcile the wrong. Could you imagine if we all apologized in that way? I mean, if you thought about it, have you ever really stepped into the layers of a heartfelt, meaningful, actual apologies that leads to change? I know I have not enough by, light years. So much of my apologies is just releasing me rather than actually doing the hard work of reconciling the relationship. And why is this so important is I think that this is the way to keep the transformation alive in our own lives. See, in Jesus' parable, as he talks about the Pharisee and the tax collector, he is actually pointing to an internal posture of repentance, which leads to righteousness through God. And then from this posture, we get to pursue the reconciliation that God has offered us now with others. It doesn't just happen passively, it takes work. Now, I want to end with this story, and here is another hope of this work and why I really think the work of becoming an ever repentant people, being quick to apologize, is 100% worth it. So Jesus prays in John 17, and it says that our unity is for the sake of the world. That when Christians are actually reconciled with one another, the watching world sees it and believes in the God who sent his son, Jesus. Philip Yancey, in his book, Vanishing Grace, he tells a story from a filmmaker named Craig Detweiler. He has a theology degree, but he also has an organization that helps students see God in film. So Craig, each year, he brings his communication students from Biola and Pepperdine to the Sundance Film Festival, where it premieres, really just showcasing independent films. And one year, Sundance featured a sold-out showing of a movie that was scathing of its portrayal of American Christians, specifically evangelical Christians, if you understand that term. The Sundance audience laughed uproariously throughout the film, really relishing the depiction of Christians as representing intolerant, repressed, even homicidal, and the director received a standing ovation and then fielded questions from the audience. Someone asked him, have any Christians seen this film yet? Have any conservative Christians seen and responded to this film? And the director responded, I don't know, but I'm ready for that fight. And without thinking, Craig Detweiler stood up to his feet with a response, struggling to compose his words, his voice cracking slightly. Then it actually quotes Craig here. He stands up and he says, sir, thank you for this film. As a native of North Carolina, a fellow filmmaker, and an evangelical Christian, which Detweiler goes on to say that he never uses that term as it's loaded with so much negative baggage, but he felt like in this moment he needed to own up to it. He was speaking from this community. And Jay stepped back, the director, not knowing how he was going to respond, but ready to fight. He tensed up, preparing to kind of launch counterattacks. The crowd sensed that this was about to get ugly, as you could imagine. And Jay says, my next words caught them off guard. Jay, I apologize for anything ever done to you in the name of God. The entire tenor in the room shifted. Audience members turned around trying to figure out who just said that and why. Did they actually hear him correctly? They craned their necks to really try and find out what's going on. See, Jay fumbled, the director fumbles for words, and not knowing how to respond, again, he was just ready to attack. He was not prepared for an apology. So all he did is he just offered a modest thank you. The audience was literally disarmed. Audience members, Craig says, they approached him afterwards with hugs. A lesbian couple thanked me. A gay man kissed him on the cheek. One person said that if this is true, I might consider giving Christianity a chance. Tears were shed far and wide, and all it took were two little words. I apologize. See, I believe a major mark of people whose lives are being transformed by the love of God is that we become unapologetically apologetic. The world is ready for a fight. Are you postured to apologize?